Hey everybody, welcome back to When Harry Met Board Games. I am Harry, and before we go any further, please make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe to our channel if you're interested in some more board game related content. But for today's video, we will be discussing my top 10 most played games of all time. These are the games that, as far as I have documented and can remember, are the games that I've played the most times throughout the course of my life. Now, first, a few caveats before we go any further. I am using the Board Game Geek, log play feature to help me in this research, as well as my memory. I do have pretty good memory. I'm not a machine. I'm not a computer, so it's not necessarily perfect, but I will use my memory to account for what predated Board Game Geek, right? Because I wasn't always on Board Game Geek and I wasn't always using their logged play feature. So there is that. Another caveat here is these games don't necessarily translate into my favorite games. If you want to see my favorite games, please watch my videos. I just recently posted my top 50 board games of all time. And as a matter of fact, my number one game of all time, which I will not spoil for those who haven't watched those videos, my number one game of all time did not make it to this top 10. It just missed. I think it would have been around 13 or 14. So there you go. And you see that not necessarily liking the game means that it's going to get played the most, because there's a lot of things that I factor in. First of all, how long have I owned this game? Obviously, a game that I've owned for much longer has a better chance of having been played a lot of times. Also, when did I play this game in my history as a gamer? Did I play this game when I was, pre the date of me fully converting and throwing myself into this and immersing myself into this hobby? Or were these games that were played after I've been in the hobby for a while and obviously had more competition and had to share the love with a lot of other games? Also, the length of the game. A game that is shorter, a filler, has a very good likelihood of having been played a lot of times by me. And finally, does the game play solo? Does the game play two players? These are things that are very crucial. A solo game, a game that has a solo variant, means that I can get at the table on my own. I don't have to depend on somebody else's schedule or whether or not somebody else wants to play with me or even likes the game. However, once you're talking about games that take 3, 4, or even 5 players at minimum to play, obviously it's going to decrease the amount of times these games get played. So, and that's actually one of the reasons why my favorite game of all time is not on this top 10 list, even though I try to get at the table as often as possible. Because of the parameters of the game and the requirements, it just missed this list. All right, so with those caveats in mind, we will move on to my top 10 most played games of all time. And I will be giving you some stats, a reference point, a combination of Board Game Geek stats for games that have been played after I got into the hobby, and a little bit of my memory for those that have been played prior to it. So we'll start with my number 10 most played game of all time, which is Star Realms. And I keep all my Star Realms content right here. This is a quick science fiction, space-themed deck building game. And the fact that it's so quick and it's a filler, you can knock this game out in like 20 minutes. And the fact that it's a deck building game, spoilers, there are a few of those deck building / pool building games on this list. For whatever reason, they lend themselves to lots of play, to repeated play. But Star Realms, I have played it 37 times over the course of my time owning it. So that's my number 10, and my number 10 is already at 37. So we're starting big. So I've been playing this game for about 3 years. I play it with my cousin Rodney, my wife Lily. I played it a handful of times with other people as well, and I've even played it a good amount of times solo. So this has all contributed to its many, many plays. Star Realms, spoiler, is not in my top 50 games of all time. I like it. I appreciate it. If it weren't for how quick it is, if it wasn't a deck building game, if it didn't have a solo mode, this game would not be this high on the list. Because while I do like the game, I don't know if I would play it 37 times over all these other games that I own that I like much more. So that was my number 10, Star Realms. Now we're going to move on to my number 9. And for number 9, I'm going to cheat a little bit because I'm actually going to use 2 games to occupy this spot, because it's not that I've played these 2 games exactly the same amount of time. It's actually that I have a hard time deciphering which of these games I've played more, right? Because these are both games that I played before I was fully immersed in the board game hobby. So most of the plays have not been logged in. The first of those 2 games is Risk. Yes, good old Risk. I started playing Risk about 10 years ago. I did not play it as a child. I did not play it as a young kid. I started playing as an adult about 10 years ago, and I really, really liked it. I really fell in love with the game. I don't play the game anymore. I have very few. I can count with my hand and don't need too many of those fingers to count the logged plays I have on Board Game Geek of Risk. That means in the last 3 years, I've only played Risk like 1 or 2 times. But I know that I've played Risk, or I imagine that I've played Risk, at least it feels like it, a good 40 times or so in the course of the last 10 years. And so it definitely has to get a mention, and I'm putting it at my number 9 spot, along with this one right here, Catan. Catan was kind of a gateway for me. I started playing this about 7 years ago, and I didn't get fully immersed in the hobby back then, but it was the first designer style, modern era board game that I started playing, non-mass market game. And it was fun. It was good. It was eye-opening experience for me. And on Board Game Geek, I have 17 log plays. That means in the last 3 years of being in the hobby, despite all this plethora, this wealth of riches here of games to play, I've still chosen to play Catan 17 times. That's on average of almost 6 times a year. So I still have an appreciation for this game. And I know that easily, if you count all the other plays with my cousins, one-on-one games with my wife that I even played over the years, I would imagine that it has to go at least in the 40 range, 40 plays or so. So because of that, because of the inaccurate data, the imprecise data, I couldn't necessarily put these 2 games higher, even though they may indeed be higher if I had the numbers somewhere. But because I don't have that data, I chose to give them this solid spot at my tie for my number 9 most played games of all time, Catan and Risk. All right, so now we'll move on to my number 8 most played board game of all time. And that's this one right here. Dice Masters, in particular, DC Dice Masters. I got the world's finest collection box because it was cheaper than the Justice League collection box to hold all my content. While what I really have invested in is the DC Dice Masters Justice League content. And here you can see my dice. I have tons of dice and tons of cards. I've bought a lot of the booster packs. And I have to be honest with you, I do like this game. According to Board Game Geek, I've logged 44 plays of this game. But a lot of that owes itself to the fact that this game is very, very short. This is another game like Star Realms that could be played in about 20 minutes. It has a cool superhero theme, so there are people that I play with that this appeals to. It has dice rolling, which a lot of people appreciate. And it has that back and forth Magic the Gathering feel to it that, again, just lends itself to, people being interested in that kind of gameplay. However, I've grown very cold in this game. It still gets a good amount of plays from year to year. Again, because of all those factors, the length and just the fact that it's appealing. And I like the idea. I really like the collectible aspect to it. I guess I'm a little bit addicted to it to some extent. I do buy boosters every once in a while. Not too often, but every once in a while. Because I like to see if I could get a new card, a new hero, if I could get a rare or an ultra rare card. That's always exciting. And also so I can add to the dice supply. The dice are beautiful in this game. Also the fact that I've learned recently of a solo variant that I read up online on BoardGameGeek.com. I can't think of the user's name off the top of my head. I did not invent it. But you can easily find that on BoardGameGeek.com on the Dice Masters forums. You could find that. So this game has been played 44 times. I will continue playing it a good amount of times each year, especially because I got a lot of content and I do want to experiment with that content. But again, this game is not in my top 50. It's probably not even in my top 75 games of all time. Yet it is my number 7 most played game of all time, DC Dice Masters. And now we will move on to my number 6. And this is a game that I really like a lot, and does reflect, the gameplays do reflect how much I enjoy this game. And I don't have the box with me right now because I actually have it packed up for a game night that I'm having tomorrow, where I will be playing that. And I didn't want to unpack this game because I have so much content for it, and the box is filled to the brim with lots of pieces and components, and I just don't want to mess with it. But I do have this to stand in for it, which is my unopened, unsealed Armada expansion for 7 Wonders. 7 Wonders, according to my Board Game Geek stats, has been played 47 times. And while this game does have an official 2-player variant with the rules, it plays best at 3 or more players. So while I have played the solo version, maybe a good, I mean, not the solo, the 2-player variant, maybe a good 5 times, the other 40 or so plays have been with at least 3 or more players. And again, that's the only reason this game is probably not higher on the most played list. It's because I don't enjoy the 2-player variant that much. If I enjoyed it a little bit more, this game could easily have another 20 to 30 plays added to it over the course of the last 2.5 years that I've been playing this game. I love this game. I'm not going to spoil where it ranks on my top overall games of all time, but a little clue here, it's very high. I play this game a lot, especially with my nephews, Alex and David, as well as my niece, Caitlin. My wife, Lily, sometimes gets thrown in the mix. Most people that I've played this game with really like it. Card drafting with a pick and pass mechanism. You pick one card, hand the rest of your hand to the player to your right or to the player to your left, depending on which round. The other players hand you their cards, and again, you pick one and pass the other one clockwise or counterclockwise. You're trying to build a civilization. You're getting different combinations of buildings, military buildings, to help you combat the forces of the military of your neighboring civilizations. You're building commerce buildings that help you manage your resources more efficiently. You're building buildings that help you produce natural and manufactured goods so that you could use them for the further construction of your civilization. You're investing into scientific buildings to grow yourself in technology, and civilization buildings that add to the beauty of your kingdom. All these different things that combine so well to score in so many different possible ways. Antoine Boza knocked it out of the park with this game design. I really like it. 7 Wonders, my 6th most played game of all time. And now we move on to the upper half of this list. Top 5 most played games of all time. And I will say that with the exception of one of these 5 games, all the others do reflect how much I enjoy them, right? The amount of times I played corresponds relatively well with how much I enjoy these games. So, oh wait, I'm so sorry. My mistake. 7 Wonders was actually number 7. I'm moving on to my number 6 most played game of all time. My apologies. I need to learn how to count. My number 6 game, most played game of all time, is Pandemic. This game is amazing. And even so, it's only my 2nd favorite cooperative game of all time, because my 1st favorite cooperative game of all time requires too many players to get played as often. According to my Board Game Geek stats, Pandemic has been played 54 times by me. Now, a couple important factors. This game is a cooperative game, and it's very gateway-like. So, because it's gateway-like, it's very easy to teach. I've taught this to a lot of people. I could think of like 10 people off the top of my head that I've played this game with. It's that type of game. And it's been well received by almost everybody, even lots of people who don't like the concept of cooperating in a game because they rather have a human opponent that they could, laugh in their face and lord it over them after they've defeated them. Even though these kind of people end up liking this game, the challenge of this game, the immersiveness of this game, the focus on teamwork and groupthink and just brainstorming as to what you can do collectively, little by little, to try to solve the puzzle of curing the world of all of these viruses. This game has been very good to me, very good to the people I play with. I have played with the On the Brink expansion that adds lots of different modules, which again has added to its replayability, which is one of the reasons why it's been played so often. Also, I just recently, not too long ago, opened up the In the Lab expansion, which again adds a wonderful module that adds to the gameplay, adds to the thematic overall feel of the game, but also it added an official solo variant, a solo module within the game, which I've played a few times as well, which again contributes to the 54 plays that I have of this game. And again, this game plays well with 2 players. I've played it most often with 2 players, even though I've played 3 and 4 players and even 5 a few times. But the fact that I could play it solo, the fact that I could play it 2 players, the fact that I absolutely love it, and that it's not too long of a game, we're talking about a 45-minute or so experience, all these things contribute to the overall numbers of 54 plays for this amazing game, Pandemic. And now we really do get to my top 5 most played games of all time. And number 5, we're making a big jump here from 54 plays all the way up to 72 recorded plays. And that is Carcassonne. Good old Carcassonne. Some people see this only as a gateway game, a gateway experience. But one of the things that I say here in this home, in the Gomez home, in the When Harry Met board games home, is that we are a Carcassonne family. We adore Carcassonne, and we play it with so many expansions. We've played the Inns and Cathedrals expansions, the Traders and Builders expansion. We played with the Princess and the Dragon expansion. We played different iterations, different variations of the game, standalone games. We played the Hunters and the Gatherers. Just recently, we've been playing the Gold Rush standalone game. And all of these games have just been, for us, wonderful experiences. I prefer this at 2 players. Great bulk of the games that I've played of Carcassonne, the 72 plays I've played, have been at 2 players. It's okay at 3 or more, but I find that it becomes more random and luck-based the more players there are. While I find that the 2-player game feels very chess-like. It feels much like a tug of war, and you feel more in control of the direction in which your game takes. With 4 or 5 players, you kind of feel like you're dependent on the luck of the draw, what tiles you draw throughout the course of the game. And a few bad tiles in a row in a multiplayer game can sting, can hurt. While in a 2-player game, you know that even if you get a few bad breaks, you're eventually going to get something that works for you. So that is Carcassonne. Again, this game lends itself very well to 2 players, which is why it's been played so many times. And it's not just my wife. I've played this a lot with my cousin Rodney, played it a few times with my nephews, and a couple other different groups of people that I've played it with. It lends itself to that opportunity. And because it's gateway in nature, it's very easy, simple mechanisms, easy to learn, easy to teach. Again, it lends itself to introducing to other people, which means ultimately it's going to get to the table a lot of times. And that is my number 5 most played game of all time, Carcassonne. Now we move on to my number 4 most played game of all time, and it is Ticket to Ride, and all of its maps, all of its expansions, all of its spin-offs, all of its iterations. I've played so many different. I've played the base board game. Here you have, which is North America. Here you have Nordic countries. I've played Ticket to Ride Europe. I've played with the Asia maps, both double-sided maps. I've played with the Africa, the Heart of Africa maps. I've played the city spin-offs that they've been doing recently, Ticket to Ride New York and Ticket to Ride London. And all of these have totaled to 82 plays. 82 times I have played Ticket to Ride. And again, lots of the features that many of these games on this top 10 include. It's gateway in nature, easy to teach, so I've played it with a lot of people who I've played no other games really with. I've happened to have played Ticket to Ride with. What else? It lends itself to 2 players. Even though I think it plays very well with 3 or 4, even 5 players, 2 players is a great way to play Ticket to Ride. It only lasts about 45 minutes. So all of these things lend itself to it being played. Also, it has a lot of different expansions, a lot of content. And because of that, it's going to get played. If it was just North America, it might get boring too quickly, and it might not get up to 82 plays. But again, I told you, I played with all these different expansions, all these different maps, all these different spin-offs. And again, that adds to the total plays of the game. Ticket to Ride, great gateway game, really fun. And again, doesn't take too much time. It is my number 4 most played game of all time, Ticket to Ride. And now we move on to the top 3 most played board games of all time. And I mentioned earlier that one of these top 5 did not necessarily reflect how much I like it. And that's this one coming up right here. My 3rd most played board game of all time. Is it my 3rd favorite game of all time? No. Is it even in my top 30? No. Is it in my top 50? No, it's not. It might be in my top 75. I think it could be, more than anything because of its theme. But this game has been climbing down over the years, and I think it'll continue to climb down. But there's just something about it that still gets to the table, and that's why it's my number 3 most played game of all time. And it is DC, the deck building game. And like I said, I have a few of these pool/deck building games. So far, I've mentioned Star Realms. I've mentioned the DC Dice Masters game. Now I got the DC deck building game. Is it possible there's another game or 2 within this category, within this genre? We'll see. But right now we're talking about DC deck building. I have played this according to Board Game Geek stats and a little bit of my memory, because I did start playing this game before I was on Board Game Geek. I would say I've played this game about 90 times. That is a lot of times, especially for a game that's not ranked that high. And again, you got to remember, a lot of these plays came before I was officially in the hobby. A good chunk of these came as I was transitioning into the hobby. And even after I was fully immersed in the hobby, I've still played this game a decent chunk of times because A, my nephews absolutely love this game. B, my cousin Rodney really, really enjoys this game as well. And C, in the last year or so, I've been playing with the Crisis expansions, and that makes the game cooperative. And I enjoy what the Crisis expansion does for it. I feel that this game plays better cooperatively. I also like the fact that the Crisis expansion adds the crises, which are basically little storylines, little story plots that give you, first of all, they give you a unfavorable circumstance that you will have to deal with while the crisis is present. And also, it gives you an objective in order to eliminate the crisis. And you add crises equal to the number of supervillains, and you try to defeat the crises and then eventually defeat the supervillains, and that's how you win the game. Again, the cooperative way, for me, it's the way to play. It's bumped up the game. It's the only reason this game is even in my top 75. It probably wouldn't be in my top 75 because I do find it otherwise. I find the deck building in this game to be so simplistic compared to so many other deck building games that I play. But I do love the comic book theme. And even though DC is not my favorite brand of comic books, Marvel is, I still appreciate the DC universe and therefore appreciate this game. And again, the fact that so many people that I hold dear and game with enjoy this game absolutely brings it to the table. It's my number 3 most played game of all time, DC deck building. And now we move on to my top 2, my number 2 most played game of all time. And that's this heavy one right here, Dominion, which I keep most of my content here in the Seaside box. I have a bunch of other content in another Prosperity box. I own lots of expansions for this game. I haven't played all of them yet, and I don't own all of them yet, but the ones that I've played, I enjoy a lot. Again, you have another deck building game that lends itself to the game getting played a lot. For whatever reason, deck building games seem very replayable. Dominion in itself is a short game. If you do not have attack cards in Dominion, it can easily be played in 30 or less minutes. Attack cards, I do find, add to the length of the game because they weaken the players. Therefore, it weakens the economy, so to speak, and lengthens the gameplay. But this game, it's one of my absolute favorite games of all time. Again, I'm not going to tell you where it ranks. You got to check that out for yourself. Look at my top 50 board games of all time. But Dominion is a game that, I enjoy playing it with my nephews in particular. My nephews and my niece, we have a blast playing this game. We play this game you don't get to 91 plays without a game getting played a lot. And Dominion, for those who have watched my recent episode of Thursday's Tabletop Tangent, check that out. I talked about my journey into the board game hobby. And Dominion is the game that I credit as the bridge into the gaming hobby proper, right? I had played many games, and games like DC Deck Building and Marvel Legendary, another deck building game, they played a big factor into my journey into the board game hobby. But Dominion was the next step where I started really investigating and researching and learning about more board games. So we've got my number 2 most played game of all time, Dominion. And finally, we go to my number 1 most played game of all time. And I kind of gave it away because I did mention it already just in this past number 2 game. My most played game of all time is Marvel Legendary. And according to my Board Game Geek stats plus my memory, combination of my memory, because I did play this game before I was on Board Game Geek. According to those combined data, I have played this game over 120 times in my life. That is a lot of plays. 120 plays. Now, first of all, this game was the game that made me start researching games like Dominion, which ultimately led to me becoming a hardcore gamer. This game is a deck building game. It has a great storyline to it. It has the intellectual property of Marvel Comics, which is my favorite brand of comic books, my favorite universe of superheroes. The gameplay is amazing. I love the deck building aspect of it. The game length is not too long. It's longer than Dominion, but it's still not too long. And for the first 3 years that I owned this game, I ran a league where we had a regular season of games where players would play each other, and ultimately it would culminate in a playoff tournament and a championship game at the end of each of these seasons. So that itself contributed to not only me playing the game a lot, but to me watching the game get played a lot by other people. So if you added the amount of games that I've played and the amount of games that I've watched, it would easily total to over 200 games. That is insane. So I know this game inwards and outwards, backwards and forwards. There's so many expansions. I own lots of expansions. Again, like with Dominion, I do not own all of them. I think it's almost impossible, especially if you want to be an omni gamer and play a little bit of everything. It's impossible to own all of them. I've played a good chunk of the expansions I own, but again, I still haven't played all of it. It's just a lot of content. But I love the Marvel Universe, so I do envision myself getting that content to the table at some point. This game is loved and adored by my cousin Rodney. It's again loved and adored by my nephews. And these guys, my nephews and my cousin Rodney, these are the people that I play games repeatedly with a lot, right? They're my, I can't think of the term right now, but they're the people that I play games with many times on a repeated basis. I game with a lot of people, but some people I switch it up more. We vary the games that we play more. Some people don't want to play the same thing over and over again. High volume, that's what I'm thinking of. They're my high volume players. When I want to play a game, a lot of times, it's usually with my cousin Rodney and with my nephews. So we play these games a lot of times. Marvel Legendary has a great solo variant. You could play it solo and it plays really well. 2 players is very easily accessible as well. So again, all these reasons contribute to why this is my most played board game of all time. So these were my 10 most played board games of all time. Thank you so much for watching. Please tell me, what are your most played board games of all time? Comment down below. I'm interested to see. Also, if you're surprised by any games that I've mentioned, or if you think that you're wondering why I've played X games so many times when there's better games, or why I've played X games so few times, please also let me know. I really appreciate it. So thank you so much for joining us. Please don't forget to hit the like button down below and subscribe to our channel if you're interested in some more board game related content. This is Harry from When Harry Met Board Games, signing off. Take care. Bye-bye.